Good morning, everyone. I have been finding that sometimes it's challenging to continue to live in an engaged and attentive way and also at the same time have a hopeful posture. Because sometimes I'm tempted to either just put my head down and focus on what I think I can control and ignore everything else, or just give in to pessimism. Just this week, we have witnessed the horrific devastation of fire a few hundred miles away, as we face up against a climate crisis in a seeming sense that I as an individual maybe am basically powerless to impact the big picture environmentally. And tomorrow, we as a country will pass from the presidency of Joe Biden to the presidency of Donald Trump for the next 4 years. For some, that is a cause of celebration. For some, it's frightening or demoralizing. And if you're in the latter category, I imagine you may be feeling that all that activism, all that work and voting that we did, what does it all come to now? How do we engage? How are you feeling this morning about your world and its future? Well, let's spend some time in Cana with Jesus, his mother, and the partygoers, and try and hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people today. "The wine is out," says Mary, stating the obvious and with a tone that clearly implies she expects her son to do something about it, which frankly does seem to irritate Jesus. Well, what's that got to do with us? It is not my time. The party is in full swing and the host is out of wine. The mother has expectations and Jesus seems unwilling to get involved. So Jesus and Mary are having a thing. Running out of wine in the middle of the multi-day party that was first-century Palestinian weddings was pretty much a social and communal disaster. It showed poor hospitality, and it threatened to derail the celebrations and bring shame to the host and the bride and groom. The party would be over early, and everyone would go home disgruntled and disappointed. Because wine represented hospitality and joy and generosity, and at a deeper level, it was also highly symbolic in spiritual terms, representing the blessing of God, and it was closely connected to a sense of God's kingdom coming close. So a wedding party without wine could throw serious shade on the happy couple and their friends and family. Jesus, the wine is out. Maybe you can relate to Mary as she turns towards Jesus and says this. Jesus, our party is in trouble. We're running out of joy, of hope, of believing your blessing is going to flow around us. We don't know how it's going to be now, and we need you to do something, anything. The wine is out, Jesus. Sometimes our role, like Mary, is to keep stating the obvious to Jesus with a tone that clearly expects him to do something about it and keep pestering him until he budges. A Jewish chaplain friend of mine used to say to me that Christians' prayers always seemed so polite to him, and that maybe we could learn a thing or two from the Jewish tradition that sees prayer as a robust, testy, even angry at times, wrestling with God. The wine is out, Jesus, and what are you going to do about it? Despite Jesus' slightly rude rebuke, Mary goes on, her eyes, I imagine, still pinned on him, and says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to do." Clearly, she was not content to leave the situation without Jesus doing something. And I have no idea what she expected him to do, but I'm almost certain it wasn't what he did next. Jesus sees these 6 heavy stone jars, each holding up to 30 gallons of water for purifying ritual washing. And he says to the servants, "Go fill them up." Now the servants were tasked that night with serving the guests and the family food and drink, taking care of their every need, making sure the party went smoothly, and they were very well aware of the impending wine shortage disaster. And they must have thought that this idea of Jesus's was the definition of insanity and would be a complete waste of time. We're out of wine. We're going to get in trouble. We need to maybe go into town and see if we can scrounge some from somewhere. And this nobody with the very bossy mother is telling us to take an hour at least to carry these to the well and fill them up. Does he not know that nobody wants to engage in ritual washing in the middle of a wedding party? Does he know anything? Is he crazy? But maybe it was Mary's fierce stare and her terse words, "Do whatever he tells you to do," that made them do just that, despite thinking it was a complete waste of time and energy. Because sometimes when things are challenging, it does seem like what Jesus asks us to do is a waste of time and will go nowhere fast. The world is burning, there's political upheaval, not to mention the issues and concerns that each one of us has in our own lives. And Jesus tells us to do what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but always by prayer with thanksgiving present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard you. Don't neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Remember the widow and the orphans. Clothe the naked. Feed the hungry. Visit the imprisoned. These are some examples of what Jesus tells us to do. And honestly, to me, sometimes it feels as potentially ineffectual, big picture-wise, as it must have felt to those servants tasked with filling 6 large barrels with water, when what they really needed was 6 large barrels of wine. And sometimes we only do it because we don't know what else to do, and we have this inner Mary staring us down, telling us, "Trust me, just do what he tells you to do." Maybe for you it does feel hard to rejoice in the Lord always, or not be anxious about anything. And it feels frankly impossible that the peace of God, which transcends understanding, will guard you. Reflecting this week with some of the women who live in the jail, they express this same challenge. And one young woman in particular, whose husband was tragically killed a year ago, after a lifetime of in and out of juvenile hall and now jail, she said, "Well, yes, it's hard to keep doing what Jesus says, but I keep coming back to it. And when I do what Jesus asks of me, I find that even in the middle of so much drama, so much chaos in my life, God is the still center, the eye of the storm. And if I move along, tracking with that still center that is God, I can stay grounded and upright despite what the storm is doing around me." Sometimes we just have to do what Jesus tells us to do, especially when we're at the end of what we know to do, especially when there don't seem to be any other great solutions presenting themselves. Imagine, channel your inner Mary standing there, staring at you, just do whatever he tells you to do. Do your version of filling up 6 large stone jars with water when the party is on the brink of disaster because they've run out of wine. We know what happened next, with no hocus pocus, with no flamboyant gesture, just okay, have a taste from Jesus. This miracle emerged that no one anticipated. Because not only had Jesus miraculously changed water to wine, but apparently to some of the best wine they'd ever tasted. When we speak about this miracle in the jail, apart from getting over the obvious, slightly challenging issue of, so why won't Jesus just make wine for all of us then? The men and women quickly point out that Jesus is in the business of making rich and beautiful things out of lives and situations that seem empty, bland, and spent. And this is good news. This is great news for those who've hit rock bottom. And for those of us who are maybe not quite at rock bottom, but are struggling to believe the future is full of hope, that all we have to drink now is tasteless and devoid of the joy we felt before, this is good news. Because part of what Jesus does in Cana is show us that God always has good for us, always has the best for us. A rich and generous, vibrant, delicious end of the party awaits you. And yes, I am talking about when we finally get to be with God forever in heaven, but I'm also speaking about our time here on earth. God can make something extraordinary out of something cheap and ordinary and normal like water. And with Jesus at your party, there is always hope for something rich and wonderful and unexpected, however hopeless things seem. Because as impossible as it does seem, with God, all things are possible and promised and on your horizon. One of the reasons I love working at jail, and I'm constantly humbled by it, is the profound courage and hope that people whose lives seem to be in ruins express. And it challenges me honestly in my relatively comfortable, chaos-free life to live with the same courage and hope that they do. And it shows me over and over that however hard and challenging things get, however much it seems like the party we're all at is fizzling out and destined for ruin, God is never finished. So my role becomes to not leave the party early, to listen and do whatever he tells me to do, so that I don't miss out on the ways that Jesus does and will do the unimaginable. So where do you need to believe that God's good, God's best, is still possible and in fact inevitable for you and your community? I leave you today with a reflection from Joshua, not the Bible story, one of our gifted writers in the writing group at jail. In this piece, Joshua is reflecting on Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And he, Joshua, is an African-American man who was born in South Africa. And he's reflecting on his own dream, his own refusal to believe the party's finished and to give in to pessimism or despair. So may it be a blessing to you today and tomorrow as we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and work and legacy that we need more than ever. Here's Joshua's poem. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke the words, "I have a dream," Today, half a century later, I stand before you to tell you that the dream is not dead and that I too have a dream. I have a dream to be able to live in a world free from oppression, free of the oppression of the body, free of the oppression of the spirit and the mind, free from the burden of judgment, for one's past should not determine their future. Yes, I have a dream today that the tattered histories of our yesterday shall not govern the possibilities of our tomorrows. A dream that what we have been will not determine who we can become. For as I stand before you today, chained and imprisoned by regrets and judgment, I still have a dream that one day my body shall join my soul and my mind in a place far from within these walls. Yes, I have a dream today of a happier, brighter, freer tomorrow. May it be so.